great basketball.
Defender to the basket, Jayson Tatum.
We're covering pre and post game back on this channel.
Welcome into Celtics Post Game Live, everybody. I'm Justin Lowe alongside Robbie. Hey, Tane. Rob, good to have you back. Kind of an OG show tonight. The Boston Celtics handle the Memphis Grizzlies 109-106. It was a bit closer than it actually was. Memphis made a comeback closer to the end, but for the most part, the Celtics actually held themselves accountable to, I'd say, a good 10 to 12, 13-point lead for most of the game, Rob. This was a big win for the Celtics. What are your takes, just, I guess, early takeaways before we kind of deep dive into it?
Yeah, so, first things first, on the road against a really great Grizzlies team. Celtics haven't been great on the road so far this year. Obviously, have had their ups and downs in that aspect. But I think the Celtics came in and they played a style of basketball that we haven't seen yet this season. And it was just a grit and grind it out, find a way to get the win.
Right.
No one played, outside of Tatum and Smart, no one really played outstanding. Horford had a solid game. Brown really couldn't find his rhythm. And off the bench, Brogdon really couldn't get going anything offensively. And along with White really kind of struggled, only had 4. Along with Hauser, only gave us 5.
Right.
But I think this is a win where you sit back and you look. Obviously, Tatum had 39. But I think defensively, they went out there and got stops when they needed to get stops, right, which is huge. We haven't really seen that yet. And offensively, they were moving the ball around pretty well, I thought. I think Smart had a phenomenal game with 12 assists. So overall, as a whole, it's a win that I can be very happy with because I think you need to see these types of wins throughout the course of 82 games to really put it all together.
Right. I think tonight was, in my opinion at least, was easily their best defensive performance of the season. I mean, there were glimpses of last year's style of play on the defensive end incorporated into this Memphis team. And to be quite honest with you, Rob, if it wasn't for free throws down the stretch, the Grizzlies might not have been, over 100 points. They hit a couple shots down the stretch and then a few free throws. So, Grizzlies 106 points, you live with that. And you didn't have to score 133 points to defeat your opponent tonight. And, like you said, there wasn't any flashy, especially offensive performances tonight. I mean, Tatum had 39, a lot of it, he got to the basket. We'll talk about that soon. Marcus Smart, 15 points, 12 assists. He was just getting involved. And, not every game you're going to hit 53% attempted three-pointers, right? Like we saw against the New York Knicks. And tonight, obviously, was the total opposite. The Celtics really weren't on fire from 3, and they still found a way to win.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of this team, is their ability to play at a high level on both sides of the ball. You're absolutely right. It was not a pretty offensive game. Obviously, right. Tatum walked into 39 points. He only shot 27% from beyond the arc. He got to the free throw line 16 times, he put up 16 free throws 8 times in that aspect. He still missed 4. He left some points on the table there, but I think, like I said before, in terms of defensive, this is what makes this team so good this year, is that just 3 days ago, we were putting up, 120 points against the Cleveland Cavaliers or whatever it may be in a loss, but we flip it around and, now you look at it, we sit back, let up 106 points to a very good offensive Memphis Grizzlies team, and Celtics pick up their 3rd straight win, so that's awesome.
I also thought the Celtics did a particularly really good job on Ja Morant tonight. Morant is able to split his defenders so well. I mean, he's just a freak athletic guy, and that's just how he is. He's just so skilled, so talented. I think for the most part, the Celtics did a phenomenal job kind of, I guess, maybe not stopping Ja Morant, but maybe slowing him down a bit.
Yeah.
Definitely not a lot of transition ball for Ja Morant tonight. We saw a couple possessions, but not as much as Ja Morant. I mean, the Celtics made him uncomfortable when it came to when Ja, was attacking the rim. He had to settle for a lot of threes tonight. I thought the Celtics should have played a little tighter because the three-point is one of his strengths this year, which in his recent years, that really it's been his weakness. And tonight he made the Celtics pay, but overall, the Celtics had a really solid defensive game. I like to focus on that defensive end because that's been the Celtics' struggle this year, Rob. The Celtics' struggle, believe it or not, has been their offense, where if you were watching them last year, especially in that big playoff run, it was their defense that was the problem in there, or that was the not the issue, and it was their offense that was just totally the turnovers, the missed wide open shots, missed free throws. They couldn't get on the same page together. They were just able to pull games out defensively. Why is this team different? What makes this team different that we can see now both I guess, equal play of both great offense and balance it out with great defense?
Well, I think the thing that offensively has changed this year is two players in particular. One is Malcolm Brogdon off the bench. Obviously did not have a great shooting night tonight. However, his presence, his ability to move the ball, his ability to shoot the ball, to play make, takes this team to another level offensively. And the second player is Sam Hauser, another guy that didn't have a great shooting night, only 5 points, only took 2 shots, 1 of 2 from the floor. Those types of guys opens up the court for Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And this is really why Tatum has been able to be so successful this season so far, is because he's been able to get to the basket. And that wasn't always around last year. Some of these, the spacing wasn't always the best at times. So in the offensive aspect, it was the addition of Brogdon and Hauser. Defensively, the recent struggles, I look and I point to the fact of the absence of Robert Williams, a guy where obviously new head coach as well. We'll talk about that. But in terms of Robert Williams' aspect, Rob Will's a guy that when you're on the perimeter, you feel very comfortable with a guy like Robert Williams who has your back in the paint. You take that out of the equation, and it's going to be a little bit more pressure and a little bit harder, and you can't play that switch defense you were playing under Udoka. They're playing drop coverage with Horford to, prevent those mismatches that Robert Williams can guard out on the perimeter. So obviously you got to look at Robert Williams and his timetable, and you would think if they can figure it out before he gets back, that's huge. But you'd hope just hunker down the fort until he gets back in that aspect. And obviously, Udoka's not around, so it's a different head coach, it's a different scheme. They're learning different things. So they're really not the same. This team has to learn how to play with each other again, which is tough.
Somebody who I thought it's weird because I'm looking down at the stat sheet and I'm like, he didn't have it, but I didn't think he had this good of a night. It was Al Horford coming off of 3 days worth of rest, 32 minutes, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, shot perfect from deep, 3 of 3, 6 of 7 from the floor. And he was actually a -7, but he really was, he really did have a great night tonight. I'm starting to I hate saying this, Rob, because last year I was like one of Al's biggest supporters, but I'm starting to see a slight decline in Al Horford's game. It's not major. It's nothing concerning to me, but at the end of the day, he is 37, 38 years old, and he's also playing in the upper 30s of minutes on nights. What have you seen from Horford? I guess maybe not just so great, not so bad, both. What do you notice about Al Horford? It's a little different than last season.
Yeah, for sure. Well, he's also playing a different role now here without Robert Williams. He's kind of slid down to that main 5 starting center position which he originally was playing back in his original stint here in Boston. So I think that's been the main difference, is that his responsibilities aren't necessarily the same that will show in the box score, kind of like a Robert Williams impact. His impacts doesn't always show 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks. It feels more. So I think that's the biggest thing with Horford. The second thing I've noticed when I look at Al Horford is he hasn't been shooting the ball particularly well, but when he is, he's having a much better offensive game. Obviously, you would think, well, no duh. I'm talking about the 3-point shot. Tonight he shot 3 of 3. That's usually, if Al Horford's getting 6 to 9 points from beyond the arc, he's having himself a good game offensively. And I think that will come with, as the season goes on, the fact that Al can shoot the ball gives him longevity for the playoffs. But right now Al's got a lot on his shoulders with how thin the Celtics big man rotation is. So, I think that's the big difference this year for Al Horford.
And what about Grant Williams? It was a little weird. It was actually Derek White was scheduled to start tonight. Grant Williams got the late nod, rather. 37 minutes tonight from Grant. He didn't shoot one shot. His 2 points came two free throw attempts. He had plenty of good looks at it. It seemed like he passed up, and I'm not saying, he made the wrong play, but at times, I mean, Grant Williams open in the corner. If he's passing it up, something's got to be up. Scalabrine also mentioned too, it seems like all of his bad games or maybe quiet games come from when he's in that starting lineup, which is weird because last year it was kind of the opposite. When he was minutes, he was producing big time plays. This season, even big minutes off the bench, it's not that he's having a horrible season, but we've certainly seen a little change with Grant Williams.
Absolutely, but I think that's the beauty of this team and the Celtics is that Grant Williams' role has shifted drastically from the guy that needs to come off the bench and get them 10, 12 points, knock down his open threes to the utility Swiss Army knife. This is a guy that you can throw in the starting lineup. He will sit there, hunker down on defense, and play a great 48 minutes of basketball defensively and, knock down a shot or two if you need to on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, he didn't take a shot tonight. So, I think that's the best part. And if you need him to come off the bench, we've seen this guy go for 15 points already this year and 12 points, knocking down shots in the corner, spotting up. So I think and it goes back to my Malcolm Brogdon part. That's the beauty, is that these guys now, every given night, can play a different role. Obviously, Mazzulla thought, let's get a little bit bigger with Grant in the lineup.
Right.
We can't play as fast when you're playing the Grizzlies. You almost want to kind of have a little bit more size on them. Let's shift White down to the bench. Obviously, the Grizzlies, they got some decent bench guards and Trey Jones over there, so you want some, competition off the bench. And I think the biggest thing with Grant is his role's changed. He's no longer a guy that we need to score, and he's more of a, any given night type of player.
I'm just looking at the bench. And it was kind of a weak rotation. We saw a little bit of Onlay, saw a little bit of Hauser, but the starters played like a lot of minutes. There wasn't one starter who didn't play under 32 minutes. Horford was the smallest, 32 minutes and 32 and a half minutes. Brown, 38. Smart, nearly 36. Tatum, nearly 40. And then Grant Williams, obviously 37. Why do you think Mazzulla, obviously a close game down the stretch, but why do you think Mazzulla is playing these starters, almost like a Coach Thibodeau type thing where the starters get heavy minutes? This roster is a pretty deep roster. What do you think, Joe Mazzulla? I don't want to say like what was Joe Mazzulla thinking, like it was a bad decision, but like what do you think was going through Mazzulla's mind playing his starters heavy tonight?
Yeah, the Grizzlies are a really good team, and this is a game where you really don't want to drop in the confidence aspect because it's the first 10 games of the season. And that's really big because in the NBA, it kind of goes by chunks of 10
Right.
in terms of your progression. So the Celtics, you're sitting back at 6-3 entering tonight's game. You've had a lot of good wins this year, but you've also had some questionable losses. So I think this is a game where Mazzulla looks at and he says, let's play the guys that know how to play with each other, that are going to be in the playoff rotation against another team who is a very, very tough matchup for this squad in the Celtics. And I think Mazzulla, letting Brown and Tatum, obviously you don't want to playing 39 minutes against teams like the Pistons and the Thunder and the Magic. However, in a matchup against the Grizzlies in your first 10 games, you really want a big portion size of what this team needs to progress on. I can understand it, but, I would love to see Tatum maybe only playing 34 minutes, Brown playing 34, Horford at 28. Obviously, rotation's a little short right now, so, you're not going to be able to see that every given night.
Right, and a really good point that I kind of want to bring up, and I want to talk about it. Kind of NBA is like last 10 games, right? Like increments of 10. Obviously still early. Obviously we're missing some key rotational players, and obviously Gallinari won't have him for the season. Robert Williams won't have him back until December, early January. Like, what have you taken away from these first 10 games? I mean, you look at the Celtics schedule, Rob, and they're 7-3, new head coach. Obviously, like I just mentioned, some injury-riddled players that are pretty important to this rotation. And then on top of all that, the NBA seemed to put the Celtics' strength of schedule really, really high, really, really difficult because you had Philly and Miami back
We
You
lost
had
him for a second.
Philly.
There we
Sorry,
go.
you had
You're
Philly
good.
and Miami to start the season. You've had Cleveland twice, Chicago twice. You've had Memphis. What have you taken away from? I mean, these are some pretty big wins to start the year against some big time opponents.
Absolutely. They've played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5 primetime games already on ESPN against very good, competent basketball teams. Twice against the Cavs, twice against the Bulls. You travel to Miami and you got to win over there in the Eastern Conference Finals matchup, and then at home against Philly. These are all matchups that are very good opponents. This was supposed to be the 10 hardest games for the Boston Celtics this season. If you were to, supposedly to point your finger at a 10-game stretch that the Celtics were playing at their worst, it was supposed to be these 10 games. However, injuries can happen, injuries can occur. So, disregarding injuries in that aspect, I am very happy with what I've seen from this Celtics team. 7-3. Their 3 losses were all winnable games that you can look back at and say you just cleaned this or that up. You're sitting pretty. I do think if you look at our schedule coming up, we have a little bit of an easier schedule these next 10 games. Obviously, up next, you got Detroit at home. Then you got Denver at home, both very winnable games. Obviously, the former MVP, Nikola Jokic, coming back into town. You travel back out to Detroit. Then you have Oklahoma at home, and then you got a tough four-game stretch against the Hawks, the Pelicans, the Bulls, and the Mavericks. But there's a 4, 5, 6-game stretch there, all very, very winnable games for the Celtics. And I think that's huge, especially first 10 games. We could have easily split these and gone 5-5 against some tough opponents there. But the Celtics, stood strong. And 7-3, much better start than last year. I believe we started 4-6 last year.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. I mean, you look at it, and we've only really lost to 2 teams, even though we have 3 losses. We lost to Cleveland twice in overtime. I mean, obviously, those are winnable games. Those are 50-50 shots when it comes down to overtime. And then that Chicago game, you played a great 12 minutes of basketball, and then you shit the bed the last 3 quarters. But in my opinion, that was the best 12 minutes of basketball the Celtics played all season, to start the year off, even though that was only their 4th or 5th game. But you and I kind of talked about this morning, like how this Memphis team is obviously projected to be the ends, along with teams like the Warriors and the Clippers, even though they've all had, rocky starts to the season. Like, this was a very tough game, but yet winnable game for the Celtics. And they came in and they found a way to win the basketball game. And that's really, really encouraging. You play Chicago, you got blown out against Chicago. A week later, let Chicago come into your place and you take care of business. You go into New York, Madison Square Garden, the biggest stage basketball, Madison Square MSG. You destroy the Knicks. And then obviously tonight you play the Grizzlies, had a 14-point lead, and you take that win. And now you're back home on Wednesday against the Detroit Pistons, which the Pistons have always given the Celtics trouble despite their 2-8, 3-8 start. Like, this is a total trap game. I don't even like to call it a trap game because the Pistons are just a really good team despite their record.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you look at the schedule here. Very impressed with what I saw. The Celtics have had every reason to pout, whine, put their heads down, and say, screw this. They have been mature. They've come together. They've unified, and they've rallied behind Joe Mazzulla in these first 10 games, right? Obviously, no Robert Williams. Then your head coach gets suspended for the season. And then it comes out that Robert Williams is going to be out for even longer than you thought. And then there's rumors of that your former head coach that you just went to the NBA Finals with, who you don't really know why he's suspended, could be on your rival, your opponent you just swept in the playoffs last year against a former, excuse me, a former, a controversial Celtics player in Kyrie Irving. So much has gone wrong, and there's been so much adversity for the Celtics team to overcome already in these first 10 games, and we're sitting back and we're thinking to ourselves, wow, I'm actually very impressed with what I've seen. Something I will want to note with this team that is kind of concerning. I have noticed that they like to go on runs and they like to give up runs. So I've noticed that when it's a 20-0 run for us like we had tonight, and then sometimes we give up a 13-0 run. I think we got to figure out how to be a little bit more consistent here down the stretch in these upcoming next 10.
Right, because we saw that big time against New York as well. Luckily, the Celtics went on their run towards the end of the game, but that's definitely a reoccurring problem. And I don't really like when the Celtics are up 12, 14 points, and it's all of a sudden the Celtics have blown a lead. In my opinion, Rob, and this is just me being kind of real, I guess I could even talk about this off camera, is 12 to 14 points, 12 to 15 points in the NBA nowadays. That's not a blowout anymore. That's not a the Celtics blew a 12-point lead in the second quarter. It's that's 4 3-pointers. That's 4 Steph Curry shots. That's 4 Jayson Tatum side steps. That's not a lot compared to what it was, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago when the game wasn't so much shoot a 3-pointer every possession down the court. So I like you said, teams are going to go on their runs, but I would like to also see the Celtics kind of balance the runs out. But that comes with improvement, and the Celtics are certainly improving. They've won 4 of their last 5, and they've won 3 straight. And they play Detroit 7:30 p.m. Wednesday night at home. We'll have you guys covered for Celtics post-game live. This is a big win for the Celtics. Jayson Tatum led the way with 39 points, but Marcus Smart was our player spotlight tonight, 15 points, 12 assists. He also had 7 rebounds and hit a few three-pointers as well. I thought a really smart game from him. Rob, any final thoughts here as we close out this post-game show Monday night?
No, but a trap game back at home on Wednesday night. Game against the Pistons. They're young, they're competitive. They're going to look to dethrone the Boston Celtics because, right now Celtics are still the team to beat in the East until they're dethroned. So, expect a good game, I think, on Wednesday night. This should be a good one.
All right. Well, we'll see you Wednesday night, everybody. Celtics and Pistons, as you can tell on the bottom right of your screen. Wednesday, November 9th, 7:30 tip-off on NBC Sports Boston. We will have you here covered for Celtics post-game live. Until then, I'm Justin Lowe. That's Rob Haytain, Ian Angelo, and Seamus Darlingo. They're also our co-hosts. They were unable to join us tonight, but catch us Wednesday for Celtics.